And we've just finished the first game of the second expansion to Labyrinth Global War on Terror. This is the Forever War. We just finished the 2017 scenario, Trump Takes Command. And we're here to share our thoughts. This is Legendary Tactics. So, first game. We've played a lot of Labyrinth in our time. I bought the game back, I think, when it first came out.
Yeah, it was great.
Yes,
loved the original.
I don't
definitely.
know how many games of the base game?
Oh my goodness,
tons.
lots of games.
But not so much of Awakening. I think we've only ever played one game of Awakening or something.
Yeah,
like
we
that,
went through about one, and we just didn't take on like the original. But
yeah. Well, I think to be honest, we had completely oversaturated ourselves on Labyrinth
at that
for
point. Yeah,
a while. So I played a few games, the solo games of Awakening. I quite liked it. What are your thoughts on the Forever War now that we've played our first game?
I really love that a lot of the events kind of tie into modern day politics of the U.S.
Yes.
And you have things like Trump tweets, which is kind of cool.
Yep.
You have the travel ban, which actually turned out to be pretty punishing in that game we did play.
I think just in future, I'm just going to pull out the Trump tweets card here so that people can see it. And also, I'll look up the travel ban. The travel ban is a little bit like the Patriot Act in the first game, but I honestly think it might be like mandatory for the U.S. to
get that down as soon as possible, right? Especially because
it's very
the
similar to the
jihadis start with
Act.
with the WMD, right? So you want to
you
want to be flipping those cells over as they get to the U.S.
Yeah, here's the travel ban here. It's very similar to the Patriot Act card.
Now, one thing I'm curious about, because we didn't play a lot of the first we didn't play a lot of the first expansion, so I'm just kind of curious because I found my focus was a lot on the civil wars going on as opposed to the jihads, and I think the same would play for you as the U.S. You didn't really focus on the flipping of goods.
Yeah, flipping to goods. Yes, a lot of it was because my prestige got up. It was fairly. It was just barely into high territory, and I did try some rolls, but they missed. And but you're right, and that maybe it just felt like I had to focus on the civil wars as a way of, my goal
there was way more of a heavy
Syria.
focus.
Once I had Syria to good, and that civil war was over, then I was prepared to shift my focus. But it's funny because a lot of the countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and so forth that normally play in to the game
were marginal.
Or Indonesia, no one even bothered with it. It was all
Didn't
about
bother.
Syria, Yemen, Libya. And that's what's so interesting about
I love that. I love how they shifted the focus, and it would be interesting to see in subsequent games if Syria is like as big a player as it was this game, because it was sort of the linchpin of this game.
Yeah. Well, in the 2016 scenario, the Syria and Iraq, I believe, start out as a part of a caliphate. So
caliphates didn't seem to play
ISIL.
this game though at all, eh?
Yeah, I've played Awakening a few times, and I've never found the caliphates to be that integral to the game. I know they had to include it because that's been a big part of the politics there and the situation there. But I haven't.
Maybe it was more like almost the token throw in, right? That they just decided to add it in as a.
Yes and no. I think that it does block some events. So the U.S. can't use certain events in the caliphate, and also it does give an extra resource, so it can potentially, the U.S. has to pay attention, especially when the jihadis only need 6 resources. So but in terms of like gameplay, it feels very much like Awakening.
right in the same vein as the original, definitely. Yes.
Yeah, some of the events seem more powerful, but and yet at the same time, I didn't feel like there was one card that was really totally
over the top,
overpowered.
No,
but there's some pretty significant event like consequences.
However, there was a couple of event cards where you did mention, hey, if that was in my hand, that was switching the Civil War to good immediately.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah,
so there are some potential if it lines up just right.
But not necessarily overpowered, but potentially consequential in the right board situation.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And the awakening and reaction markers, again, they were.
I get marginal, I think.
they're still part of the game, but not quite as much.
Not very significant.
I think it would be interesting is to play through from the Awakening, like play through from an Awakening deck, and carry that situation into the Forever War, or even start with a War on Terror back in 9/11, almost 20 years ago now,
and move it through
and play all 3 decks. So the scenarios you can play
Agreed.
all 3 decks, like one deck.
That would actually be a great, very cool experience, I think.
You can shuffle all 3 together if you want to, or what you can do is, and what I think is really interesting is you play the scenarios, but you each scenario
chronologically.
You play War on Terror first, then Awakening, then Forever War. But if someone hits their victory conditions, you don't stop. You actually keep playing. And the goal is for each side to hit each of their victory conditions. So not just getting Islamist regime resources to 6. That gives you 1 victory point. Then you also have to get 15 poor or Islamist rule countries. That gives you another victory point.
Yes.
And you need to try and get a WMD off in the US, and that gives you the 3rd victory point. So
you're trying to actually score on each of the different points.
Yeah, you try and get all of them, which would be an interesting kind of challenge, because you'd be I don't know if it would be particularly historically accurate. Not that this game is really accurate, from a
what is neat though is they throw political events into it, so that you are seeing the different politicized events that did happen.
Yes, like it's
part of the
historical game. But I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about this as to whether it's really represents history, and I think that
it's if anything, it's a revisionist history.
Yeah, of course, but I think what it does is it poses a lot of the same issues that each side has to deal with in this game. So like the US, for example, what I loved originally about the Labyrinth back in the day was, regime changes are easy to get into and really hard to get out of. You can be bogged down in a country for a long time.
Well, Syria in our playthrough was a classic example.
Yes. Well, Syria was...
it was just bogged down, in fact, the entire game.
Yeah, the whole game was focused really around Syria. Yeah. And really, the game turned on that. If I had managed to, pull Syria to good, then it would have been a much different game. So.
Now, let me ask you this, though. What do you think of the dice rolling piece? Because that's always been the knock against Labyrinth, is the the randomness of the dice.
It's still...
Did you feel it balanced out?
Well, it still has that whole idea of I find that once the scales tip towards one side, unless there's a miracle and some amazing moves, amazing rolling, or mistakes on the other side, it tends to be a slow slide downwards or a slow slide upwards, depending on which side you're on. It just tends to spiral a bit, and it's kind of tough once the US starts getting good countries, one after the other. It's pretty hard for the jihadi player to stop that. And by the same token, for the
Americans,
for the jihadi player, if suddenly if they get the American player down to 1 prestige and global war on terror relations,
it's hard to dig your way out of that, right?
Opposite to U.S. posture, it's a tough slog to get back. You got to do a lot of stuff to try and get back to normal.
Correct.
Especially because the Awakening and the Forever War cards have less 3-up cards than the original game did. At least I know Awakening did. Forever War felt like there was a fair number of 3-up cards back in the mix, but Awakening, what made it tough was that you couldn't change your posture very easily as the American player. So anyway.
Now, one thing I did notice too is with these new cards is there's a fair bit of text to sort of mire yourself through and figure out what is going to sort of trigger when you play cards.
Yes.
And there were some points where I played a card thinking, I don't know exactly what's going to happen with this, but I want to see what's going to happen, so I'm going to play it.
Yes, the game itself is very text heavy, that's for sure.
It is a little bit, yeah. So you have to be.
I think,
it's definitely not one you want to jump into with the third expansion or second expansion without having played the core set, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd be very familiar with the
base game.
Because it does. If you once you're familiar with the base game and Awakening, I think you can roll right into this game without much.
No problem. No problem.
You barely need to you don't need to consult the rules. You can just start playing, and it's just more about interpreting the events and their significance. And,
now, if you're coming from the core deck or the basic set, then you do want to make sure you're brushed up on the.
You really do need the Awakening. You know, I know sometimes expansions can kind of be standalone. You know, you play the base game and then just add in an expansion. This is not a standalone game. You actually
you need to have the Awakening under your belt.
Yes, and you need to have both. You need to own both, and then add this one. So basically, it's just adding in the cards that have covering events of the last 5 years. And that in
it is really neat though to add that whole piece of the Trump piece into it though. That really kind of brings it to a modern day kind of realization.
Although Trump tweets as an event is so random, I honestly don't know why, unless your prestige is really high. I don't know why you'd risk it, because it's too much of a gamble. Yeah, it's like if you roll low, then the jihadi player gets a whole bunch of bonuses, and then if you roll high, then great. But you gotta really watch it. I don't know. It seems to me to be.
It's almost like a Hail Mary, right?
It'd be great. But that said, if the jihadi player plays it at the wrong time, they can actually benefit their side, even though it's a U.S. event. It can actually help the jihadi player if they play it at the right time. So overall, though, I think it's a very solid addition. I think there's a lot of replayability.
I agree.
Especially when you mix in the other decks and turn it into a campaign. I think that's
100%.
That's going to be 100%. The
in fact, I would be intrigued to actually start with the base game.
Yes.
Moving forward into the second and then third expansion, I think that'd be a really cool experience.
Yes. Now you probably need to realistically, you'd probably need to set aside 6 to 8 hours to get that done.
Yeah, it's not going to be a short game. No,
I mean, this was a learning game. It took us a little over 2 hours to play one deck. Now, as with any game, you can play a bit faster. However, I would still say it's probably to play all the full 360 cards.
Probably 5 hours.
6 hours minimum if you know what you're doing. But it would be an incredible experience, and it would be
a lot of fun.
Just to see how the whole map evolves, and
quite honestly, to see if you could make it through one side or the other.
Yeah. Well, I'm just so intrigued by the fact that Volko Ruhnke designed this game, and it was a great game, but especially if you play Let's Roll, there's most of the scenarios didn't really bring countries in like Yemen or Libya. I mean, there were cards, but it just didn't seem most of the times you're playing them for buffs.
No.
You don't really.
There was almost like a token throw in here and there, right? It wasn't.
But now suddenly
it wasn't a
the
key.
The whole map comes into play, and that's what really intrigues me.
Makes it shine.
It really makes it interesting that hey, Iraq and Pakistan and Gulf states and Afghanistan are big in the first deck, and then it shifts to like other countries in Awakening, and then again in Forever War. So anyway, any other final thoughts?
No, that I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to actually playing a little more of it and getting more familiarized with the cards. We didn't actually get through all the cards, so that'll be one thing to sort of see those last. I think we had 14 in the deck remaining, so there's still 14 sort of ambiguous cards out there that I'd love to sort of sink my teeth into.
Yes, and I think in a learning game especially, you're more focused on the other guys, or you're more focused on your own cards, not worrying about the other guys. You're gonna the other players just let him sort out his event, and I'm just trying to figure out mine.
It's almost playing a single base game, right?
With familiarity, I think this would be very very interesting to play, and at some point maybe we'll play the full campaign game for the channel.
That might be a really cool episode to show off.
We probably have to break it up into a few parts. I don't know if anyone will
couple
want to
segments.
watch
Yeah,
a 6
I know.
or 7 hour
That's
video.
right. Yes.
But anyway, we're looking forward to doing that. But thanks so much for watching. I hope you gained some insight as to whether the Forever War is for you. And
any insights that you may have as a player or a potential gamer there, let us know and shoot us an idea or
just try add
thought.
something to the comments.
We'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. This has been NATO.
And I'm Cax, and this is Legendary Tactics.
Take care.